Oh, Cayman moon,
The voice of the Cayman Islands, Radio Cayman.
shining down from above.
We love our listeners.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Money Sense is brought to you with the support of One Trade X. One Trade X, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage.
Live from Radio Cayman Studio, this is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
A very good morning and warm welcome to Money Sense. I'm Simon Caudry, and I'm joined this morning in the studio by my co-hosts Emil Kalinowski and Dr. Amy Hubble.
Good morning.
Good morning to both of you. Today's show is about a subject close to the heart of what it means to be a CFA charter holder. As you will know, each of the hosts on this show is a CFA charter holder, and this show is organised in conjunction and with moral support from the CFA Society Cayman Islands. When each of us take the CFA exam, approximately 20 to 30% of the curriculum that we take focuses on the role of ethics. It is our distinct pleasure, therefore, to welcome both to the Cayman Islands and to Money Sense the CFA Institute's Director of Ethics Education. Dr. Michael McMillan is an eminently qualified professional. He's been an investment management professional working on the front line of our industry, and then took up a role with CFA Institute, where he now teaches and educates on the role and importance of ethics in this industry. Michael, it is our distinct pleasure to welcome you to our show and welcome you back to the Cayman Islands.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Well, tell us why you are here. What are you going to be doing in Cayman while you're here?
Well, I'm doing two events for CFA Cayman Islands. One is I'll be speaking at the Institute of Professional Accountants, doing a workshop on ethical decision making. I am also a CPA as well as a CFA, and I used to be a professor of accounting at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. So I certainly have a good understanding of the ethical dilemmas that both accountants as well as investment professionals face.
Well, that's
Super
the subject. You're going to have a doctor offer, are you? Who's got the more designations? Well, look, the core of this subject is ethics in the industry, the investment, the finance industry. And perhaps in order to have a conversation about that, we need to have set the scene, set the context. What do you consider the level of standards of ethics in this industry that we're talking about then today?
Well, in the investment industry, I think the level of standards varies geographically as well as by position. In the United States, I can say there are legal requirements for investment professionals, and that often differs from the ethical requirements. For example, in the U.S., for stockbrokers, if you will, their legal requirement is one of suitability. They can recommend any investment that they want to a client as long as it's suitable for that client. Now, just because something is suitable doesn't mean that it's in the client's best interest. So that's where the problem is, or where part of the problem lies in the United States.
Give us an example of what you mean by that, because there'll be people listening to this who will say, well, if it's suitable for me, it must be okay. But you're saying that's not necessarily the case.
Yes, here's a perfect example of this. I am a stockbroker, and I have two investments. Investment A charges the client a 10% commission, pays me 10%. Investment B charges the client a 3% commission, pays me 3%. Both of these investments are suitable for the client. So the question is, which one can I recommend versus which one should I recommend? Legally, I can recommend investment A, the investment that charges a 10% commission, but ethically, I should recommend investment B because it is in the client's best interest.
Sure. So it's really the difference in kind of what ethically is correct versus what's legally correct, right?
Yes.
Why is our industry, I guess, and I'll play devil's advocate, obviously, because I agree with you, but why is our industry held to this thought that it's not ethical to sell something different than maybe somebody that's selling a car or selling furniture?
I think the point of this is that and this is the same way in the accounting field, professionals in these industries try to push the legal barrier as far as possible. So in the accounting area, if you can do something and it's according to or it follows generally accepted accounting principles, you'll do it. It doesn't mean that that's going to provide the most transparent or the most understandable financial statements.
Yeah.
Well, I want to take this. The problem with having three hosts is that we're coming at you from different perspectives. So forgive me if I'm going to take a different tack. I'm interested in the personal side of this because I think this is a Sisyphean task where you are trying to teach ethics in an industry which has got not a wonderful reputation. Let's say there are lawyer jokes. They're at the top. And then a few rungs down below, at least bankers, right, as least respected, least ethical in the broader public social view. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so what motivates you to pursue this never-ending task, hopeless almost task of trying to impart ethics training to the industry?
Well, I don't think that it's a hopeless task, and I think that there are a lot of people out there who I've met, who I've worked with, who really are trying to encourage the members of their firm as well as their firm itself to treat clients appropriately. And in the long run, those who treat clients appropriately succeed. So one of the questions is long run versus short run. I tell students sometimes, if you want a job in the investment industry, honesty doesn't always pay. But if you want a career in the investment industry, honesty is the only thing that does pay, because no one stays in this business for 5, 10, or 15 years by being dishonest.
But it's the people who are only in the industry for 3, 4 years who get all the publicity and all the recognition in some respects. People only know about those people because of the failings that arise. There are many people who behave perfectly ethically and aren't known about by others. So how do we address? How does that get addressed?
Well, I think we also have to step back and look at what the perception of our industry is and who we are attracting into our industry. As I've mentioned, I get the opportunity to talk to students all over the world who may be interested in going into the investment industry. And one of the questions I ask them is, have you ever seen this movie, The Wolf of Wall Street? And 95% of students in whatever country I'm in, whether it's Lebanon, Taiwan, Malaysia, Hong Kong, they've all seen this movie. And unfortunately, that is what their perception is of the investment industry. So those people who like that perception, we are attracting into our industry. Those people who really are looking to help benefit people or benefit society are somewhat hesitant about joining our industry because they feel that the only way they can be successful is by exploiting or taking advantage of others.
Doesn't that rather go to the heart of the challenge here? There may be many good people in this industry, but at heart they end up working in a cultural environment for firms that have as their principal motivating factor, if you don't earn enough for the firm, you're out of the door. And sometimes the need to earn enough to not get fired means that you have to cut corners or you have to do things that you'd rather not. How does one address that?
Well, it has to start at the top, of course. Tone at the top is very important. But equally as important, I think, is tone at the middle. You know, you could work at a firm where the CEO or CIO is the most ethical, honest person in the world. But as an employee, I don't come in contact with that individual on a daily basis. Who I do come in contact with is my manager or supervisor. So we need to encourage the middle to behave more ethically and to act as a role model for their employees. And I do have to say, there are a lot of firms who are now really focused on encouraging their employees to act ethically and have understood the long-run benefits that can occur as a result of that, as well as the damage that can occur if employees don't act ethically.
And I get that. I'm minded to think of an example that occurred not long ago in the UK. Many years ago, I used to work at Barclays, a well-known bank, and they instituted a couple of decades ago a whistleblower hotline. If you found something was someone was behaving unethically, something bad was happening, you report these things. That's the sort of thing companies should do. And then it came out in the press that someone had put a report into the whistleblower hotline, and the CEO had hired private security in order to find out who that person was.
Right.
So the CEO's still there.
Right.
Now, he's been on television, he's been in newspapers talking about the importance of culture in his organisation, the importance of behaving well, they don't want to get fined anymore. Why is he not being fired? Why is that acceptable behaviour? That's what I don't understand. But these things that we talk about don't ever seem to change.
I think I would have to agree with you in that particular case. And right now, there are banks in the United States that continue to have ethical problems 10 years after the financial crisis.
It seems as though we've not learnt anything, in a sense.
Unfortunately, I think two things that I think drive unethical behavior. One is compensation systems. Mm-hmm. Since the financial crisis, we still have not really modified our compensation systems so that we reward investment professionals based upon their outcomes, not the process that they use to achieve those outcomes. The second thing is an over-reliance, I think, on compliance. There's a difference between compliance and ethics. Compliance people who are very smart, very capable, but focus upon rules and regulations and ensuring people stay within the boundaries of the law. Ethics is completely different. Ethics is really about encouraging your employees to live up to the values that the firm espouses or the mission that the firm espouses.
Do you have any examples of firms that you see out there that do this well?
Yes, I actually have a great example. A couple of months ago, I was in California invited to do an ethical decision-making workshop at this firm. They are very client-centered. And to emphasize this, whenever they have a investment meeting with all of their advisors and they're trying to determine what products are appropriate for their clients, they always leave one seat empty in the meeting room. And that one seat is to represent the client. So any discussions that they have, they want to make sure that people remember, would you have the same discussion if the client was sitting there? And would we be talking about these products or so if there was a client actually listening to what they were saying? And it's somewhat of an artifice, but I still think it's very effective to keep the client always in the top of your mind.
Absolutely.
That's a very interesting concept. Imagine I've been in many a meeting where if the client had actually been there, you would have, I'm not sure the client would be doing any business with the firm involved at the point.
Exactly.
We do, unfortunately, need to take a quick break. Our time always seems to fly by quicker than we'd want it to. But do stay with us, and we will continue our conversation on ethics in the investment management industry with Dr. Michael McMillan, Director of Ethics Education at CFA Institute.
One TradeX knows there's more than one way to invest. One TradeX is the Cayman Islands' only fully licensed online broker-dealer, offering discount trading services to individual investors and traders, hedge fund managers, and family offices. One TradeX has the most competitive online trading prices of any offshore broker worldwide, with no custody or management fees, free demonstration accounts, and no charge to open an account with a $5,000 minimum deposit. Trade stocks, options, futures, bonds, and Forex. Learn more and open your free demo account today at OneTradeX.com. OneTradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage. OneTradeX is licensed to conduct securities investment business by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority.
This is Money Sesne, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands and sponsored by One Trade X.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back to Money Sense, and our show discussing the role of ethics and ethical behaviour in the investment management industry, with our guest today, Dr. Michael McMillan. Before the break, we were discussing some of the thematic issues in the industry with respect to ethics, and I guess I think Emil wants to take this conversation in a slightly more historical perspective. So I'm going to pass over to you now, Emil.
Thank you very much, Simon. That's what I'm here for. Historical reviews. And right now, some people are saying we're in a bubble of some sort, at least when we're talking about the stock market, or that the financial industry is large relative to the global economy, over-financialized perhaps. So it's during these moments when we see unethical behavior. That's when we see Madoff come to the fore and Enron, these kind of moments. And I was just wondering, in simpler times when banks were simply banks and finance was boring and wasn't too much money to be made, was ethics better? Were the industry's workers more ethical back then, or no? It's just the human condition, and we always have that same level of unethical and ethical behavior.
I think you touched upon a point, Emil, about the history. 25, 50 years ago, bankers were people who were from the community. So they knew the individuals who they were working with. And so what used to happen is that you as a consumer would go to your bank and would apply for a mortgage of $150,000. And that mortgage would stay on the bank's books. So before that banker would say yes, they needed to make sure that you had the financial resources to repay the bank. Fast forward to right before the financial crisis, you would go to the bank and ask for a mortgage of $150,000, and the banker would say, oh, you can afford $500,000. And again, bankers at that point had some level of trust, so you would say, well, I only wanted $150,000, but if this banker says I can afford $500,000, well, then they must know what they're talking about. Well, the difference between 50 years ago and now is that that banker doesn't care whether you repay that mortgage or not, because as soon as the loan was booked, that mortgage is then sold to a third party, and they are then responsible for collecting on that mortgage. So as the industry has grown, there's greater impersonal relationships that go on. And this has to do with why one of the reasons why people act unethically. It's the tangible versus the abstract. If we are looking at someone, or if we know people, there's a greater probability that we will act ethically towards them, as opposed to a vast faceless group of people who we can't see, we don't know, so we don't really care, in a sense, what happens to those faceless, nameless people.
So it's seeing a movie of It's a Wonderful Life.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
A Wolf on Wall Street.
Right.
I guess that's...
But even George Bailey's uncle stole from the bank,
that's
right?
Right, so that's right.
Even
it's
ethical behavior.
It's always been there.
It's always been there, exactly.
Well, Amy.
Well, I guess how do we change that perception? Because I do think right now that consumers should be wary when they're going in and talking to a financial advisor. They need to know what questions to ask. And there's that perception. And I'd like to know kind of what CFA Institute is doing to change that perception and to help, I guess, more people have access into joining the industry, especially women and minorities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I just want to say, first of all, over the years, we have developed a better understanding. We, the science, if you will, have developed a better understanding of why people act unethically. And it's important to make the distinction between unethical people and unethical behavior. And one of the things that researchers have found is that a large proportion of people who act unethically are not really bad people. They end up acting unethically because of various situations, psychological psychological biases and other factors that come into play, which results in their deciding to make the wrong decision as opposed to the right decision.
Yeah, back to what Simon was saying, that there's these incentives that exist that if you don't beat, and we talk about Wells Fargo opening up these new accounts. I mean, if you're not beating those incentives, you're not opening this many accounts, you're going to be fired. That means you're not going to be able to feed your family. You're not going to have a job. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, part of it, that is. But also when you look at who has actually gotten in trouble as a result of the financial crisis, many of these people, many of these men principally, were in their late 20s, early 30s. And they were really relying upon others to tell them what they were going to do. So part of it is obedience to authority. Mm-hmm. If our boss asks us to do something, we generally do it without questioning the ethical dimensions of what they're asking us to do. We're also often subject to conformity bias. We see everybody else doing something, we do it as well, again, without questioning what are the ethical issues surrounding what that person is doing.
Just say that again, the conformity bias, because that's a new phrase to me. So just explain that again so I'm clear on what you mean by that.
Conformity bias, there's a great experiment. It's called the ASH experiment, and you can see this on YouTube. They bring one person into a room with 5 people who are participating in the experiment, and they show the entire room a chart with lines on it, and they ask everybody in the room, pick the line that is the shortest, and all of the other people picked the wrong line. Deliberately, except this one gentleman. And as the experiment goes on, although he knows that line is not the correct answer, he then, in order to conform with the group, chooses the wrong line. It's a fascinating
and that's called the ASH.
ASCH experiment.
So you can see that on YouTube. That would be interesting. I must observe that. One question I have for you on that, just while you're going there, though, can you actually change the behavior of people already in the industry, or is it too late for those, and it's only applying to the new people who are going to enter?
Well, it's not like we want to change the behavior of people. We want to make people understand what factors can come into play, to make them aware of what factors that can come into play that may result in their choosing or making the wrong decision as opposed to the right decision. I firmly believe that 90% of the people in our industry really want to do the right thing. We just have to provide them with the tools to make them aware of certain situations or circumstances that could affect their desire to do that. So, in terms of CFA Institute, what we are doing is, one, we're going out there talking to the industry. Part of our mission is to lead the investment profession globally for the ultimate benefit of society. And we need to make people understand, especially newer entrants into our business, that we want you into our business to help other people, because this will benefit society. And so people go into being a doctor or a lawyer because ultimately, if you're a lawyer, you have some sense of fairness or justice. People go into medicine because they have some sense of wanting to cure or heal other people. People should be going into the investment industry because they want to assist others achieve their goals and their dreams. They want to provide guidance to people. They want to provide people with some sort of strategy or direction. And those are the kinds of people we're trying to attract to our industry. And as part of that, we really have made an effort to increase the inclusiveness in our industry. Because right now, it's not quantitative skills that I think are so important in our industry. It's the ability to develop trust and interact with clients. That is the primary skills I think that are needed.
Yeah, I wouldn't certainly not disagree with that in any way. And I certainly am with you on all that, but how do we do it? How do we get there and move away from you join finance because you can probably make a lot of money versus you join finance to help people. And it may be some generational things too. And I hear this all the time. I don't know if it's true about millennials, but that millennials have and maybe it's just because they're younger and idealistic, and I am one, yes, just like Simon, but generally have a desire to make a difference. Is that true? Are we seeing that?
No, it's true.
Is that going to hopefully move into our direction too?
Well, we have to communicate. We as an industry have to communicate to millennials that by joining in the finance profession, you can make a difference. You know, we have this new movement, well, it's not really new, but ESG and green investing. So we want to attract people there. Some people, millennials, will be attracted to that because they know that investing can benefit society, not just harm it. But we have to start at the very beginning. As a former finance professor, you know, I remember the first day of Finance 101, the first thing we teach students is the role of a manager is to maximize shareholder wealth. And although that's true, it eliminates the human dimension of finance. And so we need to add that human dimension in how we teach finance. And hopefully that'll attract. We also need to diversify the academia so that we have more finance professors who reflect the demographics of their students. We have more women finance professors. We have more African American professors who are, and that I think will also help.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was thinking that there might be a delineation that's taking place, at least in my mind, with the personal individuals, such as yourselves, Simon and Amy, and then the traders that we see in the movie. I think that's what you had referenced earlier. Perhaps that's just my thinking, that perhaps those people that are removed, they're in that high-rise New York building, trading, looking for the maximum return, versus the difference of the people on the ground meeting with Main Street.
It's a question of role models, isn't it? And it goes back to when I was growing up, the famous movie that epitomized our industry was Wall Street, the word of, well, the street on which it is on, as well as the name of the movie. And it was the famous quote, "Greed is good." And people went into the industry believing that to be true, not because that they were naive, but because it seemed the obvious statement to make. And why not? Is that possible to change? How do we get role models, good role models in this industry?
We need a TV show.
Yeah, and I'll star in it, by the
way. Well, here on Money Sense, we're not quite a TV show, but we'll do our best. Look, Michael, we're always on this show out of time before we're anywhere close to concluding a conversation. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and thank you again for coming to Cayman. And we do hope you enjoy your few days here, and I'm sure the presentations that you're doing will be very much received and will make improvements in this industry here in Cayman. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Amy and Emil, for your time as well. As a final note, as we do on all shows, just want to thank each of our listeners and remind you that today's show will be available as a podcast on the CFA Society Cayman Islands webpage, and encourage you, if you have a question or topic that you wish us to cover, to please email us at moneysense@candw.ky or tweet us at moneysenseradio. With that, thank you once again to all our listeners. It remains for me to say that you've been listening to Money Sense, hosted by Emil Kalinowski, Amy Hubble, and myself, Simon Caudry. Tune in again in 2 weeks' time to another episode of Money Sense.
Money Sense is brought to you with the support of OneTradeX. OneTradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage.